then we smoothed out as much as we could of the surface to the little kitchenette. And then we sanded it down with 120 grit sandpaper to get it as smooth as we could. It doesn't have to be perfect, but smooth, you know, smooth as you can is great. And then I painted it in one coat of white paint. I used Fluff from Dixie Belle. I just want to create like a base color of white so that our epoxy resin pour, if there is any clear spots, it'll show through white. So I'm going to be using cotton, driftwood, and hurricane gray, so a white and two different grays for my countertop, which I'm going to be pouring in epoxy resin and hopefully going for like a granite or marble type look. So I've got my epoxy resin, and you just want the regular clear pour on epoxy resin. I'm using 2 of these small packages because that's all I have, and that should be enough for our tabletop. You don't want to get the fast setting kind. You want the regular old 2-part resin. So we're going to go ahead and mix both boxes, both parts A and B, in just a big mixing container. Plastic works well. Something throw-awayable, something disposable works best, because once you get the resin in the vessel, it's kind of, you know, I use this one specifically for resin, so it's got several layers of resin on it. But you're mixing equal parts of A and B, so in our case we're using the entire package, so we're just going to mix both parts A and parts B from both packages. And make sure you get it all in there. So we're just mixing them all up. It takes a little while to pour. Sometimes it wants to stick in the bottle. So I taped off the bottom of my cabinet with a garbage bag. You can use plastic sheeting or whatever, but you want to tape it off so you don't get any epoxy resin on the parts already painted. I also took my 1-inch masking tape and I created a little lip around the edge of the surface of our countertop. So, I mean, it hangs over about a 1/2 inch or so. I just want a little lip to catch any excess epoxy should it try to pour off the side. The masking tape doesn't completely stop it if it's too much excess, but it does at least hinder it from dripping down our sides, which is what we want. So we're putting our last part in here, and then we're going to make sure we mix it really, really well. So when you're mixing 2-part epoxy resin, if you don't get it all the way mixed up or good mixed up, you're going to end up with a sticky mess and it won't set up. So it's very important to make sure you have it stirred very, very thoroughly. So you want to make sure you get, you stir it, you want to make sure you scrape the sides of your vessel or container, and you want to make sure you kind of get the bottom of your vessel or container and just stir it up really, really well. When you think you're done, probably give it another 30 seconds or so, because it does need to be thoroughly mixed up, okay? So we're going to mix it here for a minute, make sure it's nice and mixed up. Then we're going to separate it into 3 different portions, and I'm just doing 3 equal-ish portions. It doesn't have to be, it can be whatever ratios you want. I'm going to do roughly equal of the white and the 2 grays. So we're pretty good and mixed up, so I'm going to mix it up a little bit more, since I think that do not want to end up with a sticky mess. That is the worst. That is the worst. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and pour it into 3 separate portions, roughly the same size. And if you wanted to do more of one color, you could. Okay, and then I'm going to spoon, and each portion is going to be a different color. So I'm going to take not much paint at all. I mean, you don't even want a whole teaspoon for the amount of epoxy resin that we're using. You don't even need a whole teaspoon of paint. If you add too much paint, it'll just make your resin set up on you super duper duper quick, way quicker than you want it to. Okay, so once we got all our resin in there, you're good. I'm going to take about a half a teaspoon or maybe 3/4 of a teaspoon, maybe half a teaspoon we'll start out with, of cotton, which is our white. And you can do this in any colors. You can, you know, pick whatever colors you want. I've done bright colors. I've done colors that look like marble or granite or, you know, whatever. So maybe a half a teaspoon of the paint to about a cup or 3/4 of a cup of epoxy resin is what we're mixing. Okay, about 3/4 of a cup. Let's just say a half a teaspoon to a cup of resin, roughly. Just not too much. Okay, so next we're going to do a half a teaspoon in our, let's see, we've got driftwood here, which is like a nice grayish color. Okay, half a teaspoon of that. Okay, and then last but not least, I wanted a lighter gray and a darker gray. So our darker gray is, we're going to use Hurricane Gray. So I've got 2 grays and a white to create a nice kind of marble look, I hope. And there's a few ways we can pour this. So one way is to pour them all in one big vessel like the one we mixed in, and then pour it on, and it creates a, you know, its own look. And the other way is to pour them each individually, which we'll probably end up doing that. So about a half a teaspoon of our Hurricane Gray into our epoxy resin. And then I want to mix those up thoroughly as well. Okay, so I'm going to mix each one of those up well. See, it's just coloring our resin. If we put too much, it's just going to make it set up super fast, and we don't want that. But yeah, make sure that you have your area completely covered, your piece completely covered, because if you get epoxy resin on it, it's going to be no bueno, no bueno. And there is our driftwood. Pretty color. And then lastly our Hurricane Gray. So since I am going for kind of a marble look, I'm going to hand pour these each color instead of putting them all in one big cup and pouring them together. I'm going to hand pour each one so I can kind of control roughly where they're going, the colors are going. And I want to make sure that I get some good marbling going on. So I'm going to try to do some swirls. So I'm going to just go ahead and start pouring slow. You want to pour slow. I'm just going to make some swirls. Nothing fancy, nothing too thought out. Just want to make sure that I get all my resin out. Okay, and then next, let's do our white next, because why not? So slowly pouring. I'm going to kind of follow that line a little bit. Doesn't have to be perfect, or you don't even have to follow it at all. You can do whatever pattern you want. Okay, so I'm going to make sure that I get the rest of my white out. Just kind of splatter that all over. And then last but not least, our driftwood. Kind of start over here slow. And we can make this enough resin to cover the whole tabletop. It doesn't have to be a thick layer of resin. Okay, so from this point, I'm going to take my piece and I can tilt it and make the resin start turning any way I wish, because I want to make sure I cover the whole piece. I'm going to turn it that way, turn it that way, let me start coming down, turn it, tilt it this way a little bit. Let me smash my tape here, let me smash my tape, tilt it this way, So basically right now I'm just trying to cover the whole top. And by just tilting it, and the paints and epoxy resin will swirl into themselves and hopefully create that granite or marble look that I'm going for all on its own. Let's go that way a little bit more. We've almost got the whole top covered. So let's go this way now. Moves a little bit slow sometimes, so we'll just be patient. Okay, let's take this way a little bit more. Alright, so at this point we've got it almost covered. The whole top is almost covered. Now I'm gonna kind of create some swirls a little bit with my one of my spoons. So I'm not going to mix it up too much because then my colors will just muddy up. So I'm just going to kind of drag it through real easy like that and try to get some of the colors to kind of swirl to create that marble or granite look. Not too much. And you can see some parts where we don't have the epoxy covering the table quite yet. So I'm going to grab my heat gun, and we're going to kind of push around the epoxy and get it to cover the whole table. And what that also does is get air bubbles out. So I'm just kind of swirling it so we can kind of get a marbly look going on. And I don't want to swirl it too much, like I said, because I don't want my colors to just muddy up and mix together. So now I'm going to grab my heat gun and push the epoxy resin into areas where I don't have it covering the surface yet. I'm going to grab my spoon, and there's a few little pockets where the epoxy is not ran and covered my surface, so I'm just going to help those along with my spoon a little bit. And that heat gun also helped to get any air bubbles out of our resin. So we should be just about bubble free. And we just got to make sure that we've got the whole surface covered. And I think this was actually the perfect amount of resin, so we did good. We did good with our amount. Cool. So I think this is going to be just about perfect. Perfect amount, perfect marbling, perfect colors. Just so long as we don't have any drips through our plastic, it'll be as good as it gets for a faux marble top on a kid's kitchenette. Or Hoosier kitchen is what we are working on. All right, I think that looks great. I'm going to give it some heat one more time to get rid of any air bubbles that we have caused with the spoon. So I'm just going to go around my edges and make sure that tape is on there really well, so I have as little seepage as possible, or leakage or drippage or whatever you want to call it. I don't want any of that. And if I do have a little bit of drips or leakage, we're going to go through and sand the edges after it's all set up, which will be about a day. So it's early evening. By tomorrow it'll be all set up. Okay, so that is our faux marble resin countertop, and you probably can't see how glass-like it is. Sorry, video. You probably can't see how glass-like it is because of my lighting is not great right here, but it's almost like it's a very shiny, almost glass-like surface. So that is our faux marble resin countertop for our kitchenette. So one more step done. We just gotta let it set up. So we're going to go ahead and apply a transfer to our mini Hoosier cabinet. I chose sunflowers. Typically I would have done this before sealing the piece, but they were kind of an afterthought. I thought it would look really cute, and I thought the sunflowers had kind of a retro vibe going on and would add some color into the piece. So we're going to add some sunflowers to the bottom and then a little bit to the top. So basically we'll go ahead and apply the transfers, and then after that we'll be sealing it again. So we'll seal the transfers themselves as well. Rub-on transfers come in these tubes from Redesign with Prima, and they come on sheets like this. So you want to be careful when you're opening up the sheet, as there is a backing paper on each transfer. So you'll have a sheet, and then each sheet has a backing paper. You want to be very careful that you leave that on until you're ready to use it. So we're going to go ahead and cut out what we want to use of our transfer, and I will show you how that is applied. I'm going to cut out this chunk here, and basically I'm going to go ahead and kind of figure out where I want to place the transfer. I'm going to do something kind of down like this, just clearing the hinges probably. And then probably wrap that right on around, and I'm going to cut it off somewhere around here. So I'm going to go ahead and mark, go ahead and fold where I want to cut it and cut it. And since I am folding it under, I'm not being exact, but in certain instances you would want to be exact, like on drawer fronts and things like that. So make sure that's right. I want it right about there. Okay, so now I'm going to carefully remove my backing paper and place it roughly where I want to go. Careful not to touch the back because it is adhesive. I'm going to try to line it up where I want it. And this looks to be about right here. Right about there. And I will go ahead and kind of rub it on with my palm. And then I'm going to use my transfer tool here, this little plastic doohickey. They come with wooden sticks which work just fine, but I like to use my transfer tool, which is an extra. And you just rub all over the whole transfer. Once you're certain that you have it rubbed all over the entire transfer, then you can pick a corner and start to peel it back carefully. And see if it's adhering, which it looks like it is. There you go. Voila.